Every team has their own wrestler. But this is for wrestlers everywhere. Wrestle hard.
Okay, so we got Robbie Lawler here, one of the best welterweights in the world and a legend of the sport for many reasons. People want to see action in a fight. You've never failed to deliver. You're one of the most exciting fighters I think anybody would agree has stepped into the octagon. There's a reason that you've got 3 fights of the years. It's because when you go out there, you leave it out there. So really thankful for the opportunity to talk with you today. Before we get into fighting, let's talk a little bit about you. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're a San Diego native, and you wrestled some in high school, and then you ended up at the Hawkeye Wrestling Club in Iowa. Greg was talking about that and was laughing. Tell me how that came about. Tell me what was wrestling to you in your life, and how you end up at the Hawkeye Wrestling Club.
Yeah, well, I started wrestling when I was in 7th grade. Just looked like a fight to me. It looked like one-on-one competition, and that's right up my alley. I already competed fighting wise, did martial arts, and just kind of wanted to continue to do that. And I just worked hard and just tried to learn as much as possible, and started wrestling. And once I graduated from high school, I didn't stop wrestling. Obviously, I went straight into fighting, but a big part of that is wrestling. So I'd wrestle at practices at like a Division III school at Augustana. Juergens was the coach there. Just went to their practices to get work in. Coached at a couple high schools, so I could at least drill my stuff and continue to work on that skill, which is wrestling. If you can't wrestle, I don't think you can fight very well. So then moved to St. Louis, wrestled at Lincoln Junior College. Went up there for like 2 years and just kept wrestling, because that obviously technique's huge, but like getting your body in shape to wrestle is something that you need in fighting, because you can know all the technique in the world, but if you're not in shape to wrestle, you're not going to be able to implement it. So I always kept that. And then I was coaching with my buddy Ben Euchre at a high school, and we took the team up to watch the Hawkeyes practice, and I'm watching the practice, and I'm like, hold on a second, that guy right there is obviously doesn't wrestle with the team. And I went over, I'm like, hey, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, I just came here and I'm wrestling with the Hawkeye Club. I'm like, what? Anybody can just come in here? And I was like, yeah. So then next day I called Terry. Actually, the next week I called Terry and asked him if I could come in and wrestle. He was like, kind of wasn't too into it. I basically told him I was going in there to wrestle, and I know how to wrestle, I know how to fight, but I know how to separate the two. And he let me come in there, and it was a terrible practice. I called him on Monday, and I was thinking I'll use this whole week to freaking push my body to at least be somewhat in shape to wrestle. And he's like, all right, wrestling starts tomorrow. I'm like, okay. I'm like, oh shit, I'm not in shape. Went in there, wrestled with Luke Lofthouse. It was terrible, but I just kept getting up, kept working, and kept building from there. And he basically told me, anytime you want to come back, you can come back. And I just kept coming back, and it was wrestling practice for the club was Tuesdays and Fridays, which was perfect. Kind of started getting me into shape. And then after the season, I could wrestle with the whole team, which was awesome. More guys to wrestle, and I could wrestle every day. So just kind of picked up from there and just kept my mouth shut and just worked hard. And I mean, they appreciated that, and I appreciated the work.
So you said, and this is something I didn't know, you were into martial arts and fighting in one way or another prior to your wrestling career. So tell me about that. Tell me, what was your start in combat sports?
I started doing Taekwondo. I wanted to box, but my dad wouldn't let me box, so I always watched martial arts, and it's one of those things where I had a heavy bag, did martial arts, watched boxing, and I'd always had a mind for it, so I'd go hit the bag, work on my skills, and then I competed at a pretty high level in San Diego. Martial arts are really good in California. Then when I moved to Iowa, obviously Taekwondo wasn't big there, and wrestling was, and I was like, all right, I want to do this. I'll just keep doing my own stuff at home, hitting the bag, lifting weights, and working on my kicks, and just kind of stuck with it.
So back to Iowa, that's a program known for being mentally tough. I was talking to Logan Storley earlier, the generation that he was at in Minnesota, one of the perennial decades of their programs, known for toughness, and just a coaching and a culture built that builds toughness. What do you feel like you took mindset-wise away from training in the Hawkeye wrestling room, being in that culture? What of that culture impacted you now as a fighter?
I kind of already had a lot of the aspects, because obviously I was a big fan of Tom and Terry growing up, just because of their style, kind of relentless, in your face. So it was really what was awesome for me at that point in time. I was right around 30, and I was like, if I'm going to be good at fighting and do what I'm capable of, I need to go in there and act like I'm the young kid again. So I went in there and just worked like I was a young kid, and just grinded it out, didn't whine, just kept getting better. And that's really what it was, hanging out with those hungry kids who are looking to be the best in the world. Or
it's contagious.
Yeah, it is.
It's contagious. Not that you didn't have it. It's something that when you're surrounding yourself with that, it only enhances what you already had.
Yes.
I feel like that's something you guys have here at Hard Knocks. This isn't like the Yankees that recruited a whole bunch of good fighters. Mm-hmm. These are hungry guys that care about each other, that are grinding for the same purpose. We all have individual goals, but obviously lots of team goals, which is something that I'm excited to talk to you later on today about. So what would you say wrestling particularly taught you mindset-wise that you've taken into your fighting career?
I think it's just being willing to work when you're tired. Like, everyone has great technique at a certain point, but when push comes to shove, can you continue to push when you're not feeling your greatest? When you're an hour and a half into practice, can you stay sharp and focus on your technique and do the right thing still? I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've taken from martial arts and wrestling in general.
Your teammate Logan Storley said the exact same thing. That was literally verbatim was what he said. What did you take from wrestling mindset-wise and now apply to fighting? He's like, not caring how I feel, how bad I feel, knowing that I have to compete when I'm tired, and being comfortable in that uncomfortability.
And nobody cares. There's no excuses.
Nobody cares. It's funny. I coach wrestling now to high school guys and to pro fighters back in Houston. And when I see guys tired or complaining about the weight cut, I was like, besides the fact that none of us care, your opponent certainly doesn't care. So you can either get through it and learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, or you can sit there, complain, and get worse.
Yeah.
So it's funny to hear that. I mean, obviously all of us wrestlers understand that probably more than any other sport, but to hear it even just on the team within an hour of each other for you two guys to say the same thing was great. So you were in the UFC, left, then came back. How did you grow as a fighter and as a man during that time period?
It was a huge thing. I mean, obviously the UFC was looking to promote and get you out there. And I wasn't fighting. I was fighting because I loved it and to make money, but I didn't want to be a star. I just wanted to have fun, compete, and go home, kind of like what the wrestlers get to do, which is nice. So as soon as I was out of the UFC, lost a few fights, I was like, I'm going up to 185. I'm going to eat, and I'm just going to have fun. So that's what I did, and I went on a nice little run and enjoyed myself. Still continue to work on my skills and get better, but I was just enjoying myself a little bit more. It was less rigorous as far as PR went, and I could just be me more, eat food, and every time I went to a fight, it was like, all right, I'm going to work out for 30 minutes because my weight's already good, just make sure everything's sharp, and we're going to see the world. We're going to go to a baseball game. We're going to go to the beach. We're going to do stuff. So I enjoyed myself and continue to push myself, and I think enjoying myself and having fun, that's why I'm still fighting now.
I think, I see you smiling. It's genuine. And I think a lot of that has to do with when you do things that you love and you do things for the right reasons, we'll talk about gratitude later, but you can tell that even as long as you've been in the game, you're still thankful and enjoying the process, versus chasing checks and chasing outcomes. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to make money.
Yep.
But, you can tell that you still enjoy it. Even, being injured, which we'll talk about too, even coming off of a surgery, there's nothing changes for you. It's just part of the process. So your coaches and your teammates would say that you're a quiet guy off the mat. How do you flip the switch and become that relentless competitor in the cage that's won 3 fights of the year? How is the calm and collected guy who I've watched the last 2 days at practice, how do you turn into ruthless Robbie Lawler? What do you do to flip that switch when you walk in the cage?
That's just how I compete. It's obviously you train hard, but like the way I like to fight, I like to finish fights, and I like to attack and look to finish and knock people out and be relentless. And my style is more of a stand-up. I can wrestle a little bit, defend takedowns, and I just try to keep it on my feet and keep it in the guy's face and look to finish. And I think fans can really appreciate that, and that's just who I am. It's in my blood, I guess.
The second principle of any of our mindset training programs is to be aggressive and relentless. Number one, being thankful for the opportunity to wrestle or thankful for the opportunity to fight. Number two, aggressive and relentless. You've said the words aggressive a number of times. You said relentless. What does aggressive and relentless mean to you in the cage?
It's just
what does that look like?
Basically in his face with mental pressure and physical pressure. So, and with technique, I'm attacking. I'm worried more like what I'm going to do, how I'm going to get to him more or less than what he's going to do to me.
So, which is great. We talked about the predator mindset previously. We were looking at the picture of Michael Phelps when he was in the Olympics, where he's laser focused on the other side of the pool. The other guys weren't about him. And my understanding after being here at Hard Knocks for the last couple days is you guys are pressure fighters, not with the intention. People might call you counter fighters, but not counter waiting for somebody else to do something. You're putting pressure on them to force them to do something, and you counter that. So tell me what that looks like, what that means mindset-wise. How does somebody apply that aggressive and relentless pressure? What's the value of that, and why should more fighters do it?
When you apply pressure, you're making people uncomfortable, and when you make somebody uncomfortable, it's taxing on the body and it's taxing on the mind. So you're putting that pressure on them, you're breaking them down with your technique, but you're breaking them down physically and mentally by just making them uncomfortable.
Absolutely. So the picture of you screaming with your lips split in half, and that was the Rory McDonald fight, right? I think it's one of the most, I won't say epic moments, but it captured an epic moment of what it means to, be an MMA fighter in that cage. There's so much emotion in that picture. Tell me, what was your mindset in that fight that allowed you to push through the pain, the intensity, the toughness, everything during that entire fight? That was a brawl. That was, you guys beat the living daylights out of each other. What's your mindset during that whole process, and how do you stay focused, calm, and even technical?
Obviously great coaching and being in shape, and but in that moment I'm just keeping score. I'm like, man, I'm beating him up. They had him winning the fight, which is weird to me because like at the end of the fight I hit him with like 2 punches and he went down, but yet he was the one winning the fight. So obviously I was doing more damage and doing bigger things than the judges were giving me credit for. But I've been fighting so long, it's when you're in the thick of things and you get hit and you get rocked, there's a couple things you can do. And one of them is let that guy take over. But me, I'm like, if I'm hurt, he thinks he's going to come in, I'm going down swinging. So right away I'm like looking to swing and covering up and just doing the right fundamental things, like attacking at the right time, covering up at the right time. And I've been doing this for so long, you just continue to stick to the basics and you don't try to do more than you're capable of.
Right. So I wrote an article. Well, I write an article every Monday for Flow Combat, a Mindset Monday. And one of the things I talked about was, how to stay relaxed in the cage, how to stay relaxed under that pressure. And pretty much everybody's got a plan, or they get punched in the face.
Yep.
So when you do, like you said, when you get rocked, you can let somebody take over or stay focused and remain technical, remain smart. Is there something that you tell yourself? Do you have a reset button of sorts where something goes wrong and you're able to essentially Matrix style stop motion, stop emotions, and positively move forward, instead of, you notice a lot of people get rocked and that's it.
Yes.
They can't come back, but then you see guys like, DC get launched airborne by Rumble, come back and end up winning that fight. So what do you do to control yourself and your emotions in the midst of those situations?
Yeah, because a lot of times when I was younger, I would get more ferocious, like, I'm hurt or something, I'm just gonna attack and like go for broke. So it's just repetition of being in the cage, but also in the practice room, you have to work on those things. So that's all you know is good stuff, and then you just have to have the mindset that you've done it so many times. You have to believe in what you've been doing. That's what it comes down to. Believe in what got you there, and believe in all the stuff you've done for all the years you've been training. How
does one believe in all the years they've been training? What is it about, outside of the hours in the gym, what is required for people to have that sort of confidence in themselves?
That is a tough question, because not everyone has it. It's just a mindset where, like for me, I'm just like, I've done this, I know it works. So what other choice do you have?
Right.
What other choice do you have other than to stick with what you've been doing?
Exactly. So you say, I'm going to lead into something I was going to say later. So you say, you've been in that situation so many times. There's also a lot of guys that necessarily haven't. Mm-hmm. So do you wait for life to teach you? You learn the hard way. You get knocked out a couple times because you didn't handle yourself in that situation. You go look at film, come back. Or, through mindset training, what we're able to do is systematically teach you how to build that confidence, how to relax under pressure, not by words, by just talking about it. Because if you talk about doing sprints, you don't get any faster.
Yes.
But by being able to, what we'll do here at Hard Knocks is being able to bring the fighters and the team together and teach guys how to do that, a pen to paper approach. So what do you think the value at the highest level of fighting, at the highest level of any sport, to systematically training the mind the way that you would your technique and your physical skills?
I think it would be huge, because for some reason I already have it. I don't know why. It's just like
some guys are born with that.
I have. Yes. I'm like, man, but and it's hard for me even to say, hey, this is how you do it, because it's just something
in you.
It's in me. So it'd be huge for fighters who are coming up to go step by step. Here's how you do it. Mentally prepare, not just physically, and make sure you're dotting those I's and crossing those T's in every aspect.
Exactly. You talk about an experienced fighter like yourself. So I was just talking with Yanni Dachmahalis the other day. I don't know if you saw the story about him.
Yeah.
Torn ACL, beats two-time defending national champion, and then wins the NCAA tournament. And I was asking him, what's his mental edge, and he's just like, you just gotta have it. And I said, he's just like, he's young. He doesn't know yet. He just like, you just gotta have it.
Believed.
Yes.
And there was no other thing other than believing.
Yeah.
Why would you do anything other than
exactly.
believe?
So when you've competed at the world level, when you've been surrounded by the best coaches and the best training partners and all this sort of stuff, to you just got to have it. Well, believe. To the other 98% of the world, we have to be able to teach that, or they wait until hopefully one day life teaches them. So that's been the reason why the mindset training programs have been so successful.
That's kind of how I am. I'm like,
you just got it. Yeah, and unfortunately, most athletes aren't like that. Now, even at the highest level, if you watch Greg Jones's video that he put out the other day, that people expect high-level athletes not to feel nervous.
Yeah.
But the hero and the coward feel the same thing. Every time before you walk into the cage, you feel the same thing, whether you're fighting somebody that's great or somebody that's not. The difference is what you do with it. So that's something that we could talk about later, but the idea being is, some people are born innately with these abilities. The rest of the world, that's where mindset training comes in, where you can actually teach somebody to cope. You want to be like Robbie Lawler? Well, sorry, you weren't born Robbie Lawler, but I could teach you the skills that maybe he might have been born with that you weren't. And you don't have to wait 20 years of being in the game. You can to develop those skills. Technical skills are going to take the time. You need the mat work. You need the fights. So yeah, it's funny to hear that. And on the same route with that is, why do we work with high level athletes? It's not that these fighters or these wrestlers that are winning national championships necessarily have damage control. Everybody's got things they can get better. But why not flex the strongest muscle that you have?
Yes.
If you're a wrestler, work more wrestling.
Oh, for sure.
If you're a striker, work more striking, because you want to make your strengths freaky. So it's something that in 2018, a goal for us is to remind people there doesn't have to be something wrong with you to work on your mindset. GSP is notorious for working, for utilizing mental training in his camps. Pretty good fighter. And it's not about damage control. It's also about, like I said, flexing the muscle that's already strong. I'll throw in a question for the fans. You know, you've defeated so many great competitors. I was getting ready for this interview, and I watched a lot of your fights, but I went through and saw the list of the guys that you beat, and I was like, damn, you beat a lot of great guys. What was your favorite win, but what was also your hardest loss? And why?
Greatest win. Probably
Most satisfying win, because it's probably not what most people would think.
I always feel like when I lose, I win. Which is weird. Like when I lost to Hendricks the first time, I handled myself, did the best I could, and I came back stronger because of it. So it's like when you lose, you only lose if you don't learn anything and you don't get better. So like I always look at my losses and I'm like, those are the ones I keep track of. Like, I'm like, oh yeah.
If we won all the time, we wouldn't learn much.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Like I said, I run a wrestling club in Houston, and I have a kid that's ranked 9th in the country, full ride to NC State, number 4 team in the NCAA, and I took him to tournaments to take L's because he's not going to get touched in the state. And the goal was, of course I want you to win, but I want you to either get challenged or lose, because it's the only way that we evolve. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I literally said it at wrestling practice the other day. I said, we're not going to local tournaments. I said, we're traveling out into other areas so that you guys can take L's. So like, well, what do you mean? We don't want to lose. I said, I don't want you to lose. You don't take a loss, you take a lesson. Otherwise, you just justify what you're already doing, and why would you need to do anything different?
You can't evolve, and you just...
So what's the fight that made you evolve more than any other? Every fight.
I'm like, man.
I mean, that's a valid answer.
I did that. I did this. I mean, because every fight, win or lose, you're tweaking things. You're like, all right, how did I feel? So yeah, every time I'm like.
So most heartbreaking loss, and how did you bounce back from that? The loss that hurt the most, and how did you collect yourself, come back stronger from it? Maybe it wasn't in fighting.
Yeah, I feel like, the first Hendricks fight was a rough one. Obviously the Woodley fight, but it's more or less all what you put into it is what hurts the most.
Absolutely.
And you just felt like,
So you put all this into it. Wrestlers more than anyone understands as close to what fighters feel when they put into it. The difference is, this is how you pay your mortgage. This is, it's not just wrestling practice and strength and conditioning. Having made the transition myself from wrestling to coaching wrestling to now grappling and coaching grappling, it's different. You put in a different level of yourself as a fighter than you do in a wrestler. Wrestling being probably the only comparison that one could make. But, how do you train, put everything that you have
and believe,
and then lose and bounce back and be successful the next time? How do you bounce back from a loss?
You just kind of look at, all right, I wasn't at my best, and you look at it as, you nitpick everything. You're like, all right, how was my training camp? How was my food? Where can I get better? what should I take out, what should I add? And that's the kind of thing you do every fight, especially after losses.
Absolutely. So we have a self-knowledge worksheet called a fight evaluation, and in this fight evaluation, we help break down what fighters did well, what they didn't do well, what that actually looks like. Ultimately, people look at fights and they break down their fights, and it's more so focused on technique. It's not necessarily focused on the things outside of that are also within their control, like their effort, their attitude, and their aggressiveness. So you could literally be in a wrestling tournament, for example, or even a grappling tournament, and you can do this match evaluation or fight evaluation, and you can make adjustments that are more than just like, oh, well, yeah, I got double legged 5 times, so I need to work on my stance. I need to work on my defense. I'm showing Robbie this right now, what it looks like. Being able to fill this out after every fight, it's more than just, for those of you listening, it's tangible measurements of effort, attitude, and then aggressiveness. In your stand-up, are you striking first? Do you have good ring control? Are you taking several shot striking attempts? Yes or no? On top, are you controlling your opponent, looking for submissions, or are you just looking to hold them down? On bottom, are you attempting escapes, or you're just trying not to get finished? Effort, did you never quit? You see fighters quit all the time in the cage. You see guys doing well, things don't go their way a couple times, they quit. Attitude, do you have great body language? Did you fight hard against the cage in the end of the rounds? That's where you can meet tactical, physical with mindset that's not just lip service.
Definitely.
So what's the value of doing things like this with fighters instead of just watching film?
It's huge, and it's kind of funny, like that all that should be what you, like when I went on my title run, that's like what we worked on. Everything you put on was like, hey, be strong in this position. What are you doing in this position? Are you looking to get up? Are you looking to...
Performance factors.
Yep.
We talk about performance over outcome all the time, but what does that actually look like? We conceptually understand, but when the lights are on you and there's millions of people watching, whether or not that affects you mentally, in the moment, it's hard to necessarily know what to focus on unless you know what to focus on.
Yes.
So being able to outline that, saying that, it's not that I'm necessarily looking to do X, Y, and Z. I need to pressure forward. I need to improve my position. I need to break my guy versus worrying about wins and losses. So that's something that I think is going to be valuable and transformative. One of the things I'm going to ask you in a minute here is talking about how special things are here at Hard Knocks, but I think there's so many things that already separate this gym.
Yep.
I think having a systematic way for fighters to focus on the right things is going to make guys that are already really freaking good in a place where they jump massive levels. Maybe guys that aspire to be like you, but they're not born like you, can jump levels. The good become great, the great become elite in an expedited fashion. Instead of having to have, how many years you got in the sport now?
18.
Yeah, 18.
And fighting full time.
Fighting full time, exactly. So something I wanted to talk, on terms of your character. I walked into Hard Knocks the other day, and I saw you on the sidelines watching, not as a spectator, but with an intent to help your teammates, which you got up multiple times. You could tell that you're a leader. I could tell as a coach myself, and being around this sport for 25 years. I can tell, and your coaches have said the same thing, enough that I guess you were selected as part of the leadership council here at Hard Knocks. So what is this leadership council? What is it, and why do you think you've been selected as someone that's going to be a leader on this team? I mean, everybody can see it. You have a presence, you have a leadership presence about you. People look to you not just because you're a great fighter. What is it about you that you feel like makes you a good leader?
I don't know what this, whatever. I'm kind of downplay everything, but yeah, I've been in the sport for so long, been around, been under a whole bunch of different really good coaches and learned a lot. And for me to take all this knowledge and keep it for myself would be like ridiculous. It's like, you want to make it easier for these fighters, give little pieces. It's all about giving back and caring about the guys. So like, guys are in here and you're like, man, you really want them to succeed, so why wouldn't I try to help them out, give them a little tidbit here and there?
I think, they say as athletes we'll bust our ass for people that bust their ass for us, right? And I think something that's unique here, it's not just a bunch of high-level coaches busting their ass. You bust your ass for each other, and that's kind of what I saw when I saw you as a teammate and as a leader walking around. Everyone here we're all invested in each other. It's not just a bunch of individuals looking to be successful for themselves. Everybody wants individual success, but we everyone here also takes care of each other. Now, with the Leadership Council, that's something that was...
Hold on one second. Somebody did this for me, so I'm going to do it for like Matt Hughes did it for me. Jens Pulver did it for me. Like, a lot of guys help me out, so if I do it for them, how many lives will those guys touch?
I think
and then how many lives
absolutely.
will those guys touch
Absolutely.
that those guys touch?
I feel like combat sports, it's built in us to want to give back. It's a sport that takes so much out of us, and if we're successful, it's because so many people put something into you. Have you ever seen that picture? You got kids?
Yeah, I saw it.
You ever seen that picture where it's a picture of like a dad and his son, and it's all it shows a picture of dad with a lot of holes, and it's filled with the son is filled with all the holes that the dad has. I feel like that's what coaches and good teammates do to us. They've given us so many pieces of themselves. So what that means is now when we have the opportunity to give back, it's almost like you feel obligated.
Yeah.
Not in a negative way. You feel obligated to give back. I know for me, I was in the FBI for 7 years, and I started running my own wrestling club, and I found, like, in my heart, obligated to find a way to have a career in wrestling.
Yep.
Despite the fact that I got my dream career, everything that I ever wanted, to be in the FBI. So the Leadership Council that was developed here, what do you think is going to be the value of that, to have essentially peer leaders help develop and mitigate things within the team, instead of most places where it's from the top down, it's going to be from the bottom up?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I mean, guys who are doing the exact same thing as they are, who are a little bit more knowledgeable, do a better job, and basically what we're doing is helping to show these guys the way, so that we don't have to anymore.
Right.
So that they can, if they go off to another gym, they can set up and implement these same type of...
Create the culture.
Yeah.
Create the culture from the inside out. If you follow anybody that's listening, if you follow wrestling well, you understand that Penn State and Ohio State have created cultures that separate themselves from the rest of the entire NCAA tournament. What are the parts of that culture? If you talk to the coaches and the wrestlers, they'll say two things. They'll say God is the center of their teams, from the top down and the bottom up. From the coaches, not just coaches preaching something but they don't believe it. From the coaches to the athletes to their families, and vice versa. They'll also say it's a strong attitude of gratitude, which is something that I'll ask you about here in a minute. What do you feel like is the importance of faith, and if not faith, spirituality in one way or another, in combat sports, in fighting, in wrestling, having something greater than just fighting be the basis of your life?
Yeah, because I mean, obviously we're fighting and we're competing, but a lot of times when you watch somebody fight, you don't just see moves. You don't, if you're watching, you're like, man, this guy has something. He has spirit. And I think a lot of people in any sports, you can see this, guys who are willing to fight when the chips are down. It just exudes. You're like, man, there's something more to fighting and competing than just technique. And
right.
So it's spirituality and believing in God is a huge aspect of life, but a huge aspect of sports.
How has that impacted you?
It's kind of funny because I don't ever I'm spiritual, I don't preach this or that, and I
think there's spirituality and religious.
Yep.
So what's the difference? You know, you strike me as a spiritual guy, someone that has deeper in him than just what's on the surface. What does that mean to you, and how has it impacted your competitive career?
Never actually thought about it. That's a really good question. I just feel like I try to do the right things, compete at a high level, but always have respect for my opponent, the sport, and what I'm representing. It's not just going out there to make a whole bunch of money and disrespect my peers so that I can raise my level. It's about raising my bar, and hopefully everyone else around me is going to raise their bar.
You're focused on raising your own bar. You don't care about all the other people.
Everything else,
you don't have to put other people down to do it.
Yeah, everyone else will see this and be like, man, that's the way I want to do it.
There's a big difference between the way people look at you, and I won't name names, but probably the way that they look at some other people in the UFC as to, you know, you may be great fighters, but, you know, who you are as a human, who you are as a person, number one.
Is very important.
And very important, because when you leave the sport, who are you?
Yeah.
Some guy that used to fight that was a lot of negative things. But yeah, I mean, he did good in the cage, or people are not going to remember everyone by the titles that they won. They're gonna remember how they won those titles.
Yep.
And I think that's something unique about you. You know, not just from getting to know you and hearing multiple people talk about you, but also just the way you carry yourself. That's the way. If people were to say, look at what a champion looks like in a very violent sport where there could be a lot of negativity and emotions and BS, you know, I think they would point